November 1970. An elite U.S. Special Operations Unit launches one of the most daring secret actions of the Vietnam War. September 1943. German Special Forces prepare for a mission personally ordered by Adolf Hitler. Both will be raids, fast in and fast out, hit and run, precisely targeted assaults behind enemy lines, always covert or classified, with highly specific objectives, whether political or military. The battle plan is raiding. July 1970. America is beginning its pullout from Vietnam. Peace talks are underway in Paris. But one issue remains an open wound for most Americans. U.S. POWs, prisoners of war, still held by the enemy. And MIAs, American troops missing in action. May 9th, 1970. Routine reconnaissance photographs taken over North Vietnam are being assessed at a top-secret Air Force facility. The analyst is amazed by what he's found near Hanoi at the Son Tay POW camp. It will rock the entire U.S. military chain of command, all the way up to the White House. Brigadier General Donald Blackburn is the Pentagon's Special Assistant for Top-Secret Counterinsurgency and Special Activities, so-called Black Ops. It's up to him to plan the U.S. military response, then present it to the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and ultimately, President Richard Nixon. 27 years earlier, Italy, 1943. World War II is at a crossroads. The Allies have invaded Sicily and are preparing to attack the Italian mainland. The Italian Fascist Grand Council has ousted Mussolini, Hitler's most loyal ally. Mussolini is imprisoned at a secret location. As Italy prepares to enter peace talks with the Allies, Hitler desperately needs to keep Italy in the war, so he needs Mussolini back in power. The solution for Nixon in 1970, and Hitler 27 years earlier, is the same: raids.
A raid is an offensive operation, usually conducted by a small to mid-size unit of very specially trained personnel. It goes against a specific target at a specific time, usually with very carefully laid out objectives, and then you come home. That last part's really important because without the come home part, the raid is not successful.
A raid can be directed against a human target, a key commander, a headquarters, or it can be against equipment, resources, logistic stores. Either way, it's to hit the enemy at a key and vulnerable point.
But to stand even the slightest chance of success, all raids must meet the same basic requirements. Clarity of purpose. Raids always take place on a knife edge between success or failure, so commanders must be absolutely clear what they need to achieve. Appropriate means. Raids are often very different to conventional military operations and may require a very different type of soldier or methodology. Intelligence. Raids always take place behind enemy lines. Up-to-date information about the target and enemy dispositions is vital. Insertion. The team must get to the target before the enemy is even aware the raid is underway. Surprise is critical to delay enemy response as long as possible. Execution. A raid must be fast and merciless. Once the team is in, the operational area must be secured and protected. And split-second execution must always allow for backup plans in case something goes wrong. Exit strategy. A team must never go in until it knows precisely how and when it will get out. Italy, 1943. And North Vietnam, 1970. Now it is time for commanders to meet the first requirement in the battle plan for raids. Clarity of purpose. More than any other military operation, raids must have a highly specific objective. Where there is no clear objective, the danger of failure is vastly increased. Saturday, May 9th, 1970. The top-secret U.S. Air Force Field Activities Group at Fort Belvoir. Specialist Norv Kleinbell is analyzing reconnaissance photos of suspected POW camps in North Vietnam. He keeps staring at one, utterly amazed by what he's found. It's a desperate coded message from POWs at the Son Tay camp. The message, soon on its way to the most secret corridors of the Pentagon and the White House, reads, "We have wounded. Rescue them." It's a job for Brigadier General Blackburn's Special Operations Division. July 10th, 1943. The Allies land in Sicily. Italy wants to end the war, but as long as Mussolini is in charge, that won't be possible. 2 weeks go by, and Mussolini's fascist Grand Council unleashes a revolt against him. The dictator is removed from power and from public view. Mussolini's disappearance is a major problem. Without him, Hitler has little chance of defending Italy against the Allied invasion everyone knows is coming.
Hitler thought that by safeguarding his old friend Mussolini, he could in some way reinvigorate fascism in Italy and perhaps get the Italians to re-enter the war on his side once more.
Hitler also wants to convince his other allies that he will be loyal to them, even if their regimes collapse. July 26th, 2 days after Mussolini disappears, Hitler orders Operation Oak to find and free him. In 1943, Hitler and the man he places in charge, General Kurt Student, are clear about their objective: find Mussolini and put him back in power. In 1970, the objective for General Blackburn's situation is equally daunting. He has received an astonishing piece of intelligence. How will he respond to the desperate plea from American POWs being held in a North Vietnam prison camp? Washington, 1970. Astonishing spy photos of a POW camp in North Vietnam are passed to the Pentagon's top-secret Special Operations Group. U.S. prisoners laid out their clothes to dry in this yard, spelling out SAR, code for search and rescue. In one corner of the compound, the POWs also scuffed the letter K into the dirt, code for come and get us. More messages name 6 men who are in bad shape and need to be rescued in a hurry. A raid to get the men out requires authorization from the President himself. General Blackburn and his Special Operations Division first consider a quick surgical strike, just to rescue the 6 POWs in bad shape. Then they decide to go for broke and get all the men out. The military planners have a clear objective, and so do the political decision makers at the White House.
The Nixon administration was very much aware of the enormous political benefits of a successful rescue of American POWs.
So both German General Kurt Student in 1943 and American General Donald Blackburn in 1970 have met the first requirement in the battle plan for raiding: Now, they must address the next. Appropriate means. Commanders must choose the right men and the right technology and equipment.
The most important aspect of appropriate means is the right people. It's about superb soldiers who are imaginative and flexible.
In World War II, in the North African desert, the British started operating their raids on the commando concept, with large numbers of men attacking one target. A 25-year-old captain, David Sterling, changed everything. Instead of 100 men, Sterling proposed just 4. Highly trained, highly motivated, and operating independently behind the lines. Sterling's mathematics were simple. One team of 100 commandos could attack only one target at one time. But those same 100 men, divided into teams of 4, could attack 25. It was the birth of the British Special Air Service, the SAS, and the beginning of modern special operations. Small teams of highly trained soldiers would become the hallmark of this special operations battle plan. To rescue Mussolini, Hitler does have highly trained soldiers. Equally important, he also has a strong commander. The general he appoints to oversee Operation Oak is Kurt Student, the creator of Germany's elite parachute troops. And it is Student who pioneers the special equipment and methods for airborne warfare. Especially important for Operation Oak is assault by glider.
Gliders were sort of the helicopters of their day. They had the ability to take a small group of men and lay them down very precisely on a place, and they were extensively used by both the Germans and ourselves during World War II.
But Hitler also tasks another man to lead the mission. Otto Skorzeny, the head of Germany's special forces.
Hitler was very fortunate to have 2 superb soldiers in Student and Skorzeny. Student had the resources, he had the experience, he had the aircraft, the men, and so on. In Skorzeny, there was a ruthless, very focused, charismatic leader who could lead these men on the raid.
America, 1970. Now General Blackburn must select the man who will lead the Son Tay Raiders. He picks a former World War II Army Ranger, now a lieutenant colonel, Arthur Bull Simons. The choice may not seem obvious. Simons has just recovered from a stroke, but he is already super fit and highly experienced.
The key trait in a raider or a particularly effective leader is flexibility. You've got to have superb technical skills, you've got to be in great physical shape, and you've got to do things right. The one thing that made Colonel Bull Simons a truly great raider was he could see an opportunity and seize it.
The most dangerous part of the Son Tay mission is landing in the POW compound itself. The man Blackburn and Simons choose to lead the unit that will hit the compound and actually release the Americans from their cells is a daring young Special Forces captain, Richard Meadows. Like most of the raiders, their relationship was forged in Vietnam.
Tightly knit, highly trained troops with a strong esprit de corps are what is required in this situation to conduct this raid. And these men with experience of fighting in Vietnam is exactly what Colonel Bull Simons has for the raid on Son Tay.
Simons selects his raiding team and the helicopter pilots who will fly them in and get them and the POWs out from volunteers. The project is so secret that no one knows what they are volunteering for. Not even the generals in charge of the Vietnam or Pacific theaters of war or at Strategic Air Command are allowed to know. In military jargon, it is a very close hold. Simons establishes his base in Florida at Eglin Auxiliary Field No. 3 and begins training. He and his team build up their own assault gear. they devise an innovative method of insertion using C-130s and helicopters. Like Student in 1943, Bull Simons has the right men and equipment. But without the next requirement in the raid's battle plan, not even the best men with the best leaders can mount a successful operation. Intelligence gathering is key. Without it, the raiding team will flounder and lives could be lost. 1970. At a secret location somewhere in the United States, an elite special operations unit led by Lieutenant Colonel Bull Simons is preparing a mission to spring 60 American POWs from the Son Tay camp in North Vietnam. Italy, 1943. German special forces under General Kurt Student are preparing an operation to rescue Mussolini so Hitler can put him back in power. Now, Student and Simons must address the next requirement in the raid's battle plan. Intelligence. Commanders must have up-to-date and accurate intelligence to plan the raid, and a thorough familiarity with the target once they're in the operational theater.
Intelligence is absolutely vital. The problem is you're going in weaker. By definition, you're the weaker force. You're using surprise to overcome the resistance you think is there. If you guess wrong, you can be in real trouble.
A classic example of intelligence used to great advantage was Operation Biting in February 1942. Germany had constructed a chain of radar stations along the French coast to detect Allied bombers heading for the fatherland. The British needed details to develop a countermeasure. A parachute raid was mounted to steal a radar unit from one of the installations. Time on the target would be limited. Intelligence provided the raiding force with a model of the area so they could practice every detail of the assault. The mission was a success. Student's Operation Oak has a major problem right from the start. He doesn't know where Mussolini is. Until he does, Student can't even begin to plan a raid to free him. July 28th. Student receives reports that Mussolini has been spotted at the port of Jeddah, but then taken out to sea. To where? One source has Mussolini being held on the island of Ponza, another on Ventotene, another on Santo Stefano.
Although Hitler was adamant that he wanted to release Mussolini, the difficulty for Student was that he didn't know where Mussolini actually was.
Then Student receives intelligence that Mussolini has been moved to the Italian naval base at Maddalena on the north coast of Sardinia. Further reports put Mussolini in a villa on the outskirts of the base.
Student puts in train plans for an amphibious operation, but Hitler orders him to hold back until they're sure that Italy is going to declare an armistice.
August 28th, Mussolini vanishes again. The trail goes cold. Then, Student receives intelligence that a seaplane has landed on Lake Bracciano and a military ambulance seen driving away. If it is Mussolini, and it's a big if, the obvious place to hold him is somewhere in the mountainous and deserted area of the Gran Sasso d'Italia. Here, isolated and only approachable by cable car, is a hotel, the Campo Imperatore. Student surveillance unit intercepts radio traffic from the hotel, referring to a special guest. He sends a German officer to inspect the hotel with a cover story that he needs a location for a convalescent home. The German is refused admittance. The hotel is guarded by 150 Carabinieri, Italy's paramilitary police force.
Student takes this as confirmation that Mussolini is being held in the hotel. He then goes about the business of taking aerial reconnaissance photographs of the area, and only then does he begin to start to plan the raid.
Student is right. Mussolini is being held under guard at the hotel. Now he has met the intelligence requirement in the battle plan for raids. But it might be too late. On September 9th, the Allied invasion begins at Salerno on the Italian mainland. 27 years later, Operation Kingpin, the plan to spring American POWs from the camp at Sainte. General Blackburn and his planners, and Bull Simons and his assault team already have the first vital piece of intelligence provided by the POWs themselves. They know precisely where the Americans are being held. The Pentagon collects information on the prisoners believed to be at Sainte. Blackburn has the most sophisticated aerial reconnaissance in the world at his disposal. He sends in the famed SR-71 Blackbird, the world's fastest, highest-flying plane. It's backed up by satellites, Buffalo Hunter drones, and RF-4 reconnaissance planes. The CIA provides intelligence on the camp's layout. And Simons builds a detail-accurate, full-scale replica so his assault team can practice in the most realistic conditions possible.
Raids are either time or event-based, so execution is critical. Therefore, rehearsals and backup plans are an essential part of it. If anything goes wrong, you have to respond together as a team.
And yet the men still don't know their destination, or that the objective of the mission is to free American POWs. But Simons is much more concerned about another aspect of intelligence and security. Twice a day, Soviet spy satellites overfly the Eglin base, where his team is training. If they spot the replica camp, if Moscow figures out what's being planned and informs the North Vietnamese, Simons' assault team could be lured into a trap. Eglin Air Force Base, Florida, October 1970. To prevent Soviet spy satellites spotting his replica POW camp, Bull Simons' team trains only at night. Then, before dawn, the camp is dismantled every day. Simons' plan is daring in the extreme. The assault teams will take off by helicopter from Thailand. They will be refueled in flight by a rescue HC-130. Two other combat Talon C-130s will lead the helicopters in. To avoid radar detection, they will fly low and follow the terrain. As the raiders approach the target, U.S. aircraft flying off carriers from American Task Force 77 in the Gulf of Tonkin will mount a diversion over Haiphong Harbor, but using flares, not bombs. The coordination has to be precise, and the raid itself will be at night. At the Sainte target, the first helicopter will knock out the guard towers dominating the compound. The Spearhead assault team, led by Special Operations Captain Richard Meadows, will land inside the compound in a second chopper, eliminate the guards, and start to liberate the POWs from their cells. The main assault force, led by Bull Simons, will land in two larger helicopters, blast holes in the compound's walls, and storm in to deal with any other opposition. The helicopters will pull out to standby positions. More helicopters will also wait at standby positions until called in to lift out the POWs and the assault teams. While planning the raid, however, Simons becomes aware of two problems. First, 400 yards away from the POW camp is another compound the helicopter pilots might mistake for the prison. The second is the opposition. 12,000 North Vietnamese troops are garrisoned close to Son Tay. There is also the possibility of heavily armed Soviet or Chinese military instructors in the area. To get in and out before these forces arrive, the rescue mission is timed to last a mere 26 minutes. And even then, it will be tight. Then Simons hits another problem. Meadows figures he needs a 16-man team to take the compound. But the only helicopter small enough to land there, the UH-1, isn't big enough to carry the entire assault team. The next larger helicopter, an HH-3 Jolly Green Giant, is big enough for the team, but too big to land in the compound. Simons has only one course of action. Meadows and his team will crash land their Jolly Green Giant through the trees into the compound. The landing will be hard.
This is a very bold decision. The entire raid rests on the successful insertion of that one helicopter team. If it ends in a fireball in the middle of the camp, the raid is a failure.
General Blackburn and Bull Simons are keenly aware that Operation Kingpin is high risk, and that in high-risk ops, things go wrong. A tragic example of a raid that went terribly wrong was an even more high-risk and complex mission, Operation Eagle Claw. In November 1979, supporters of Iran's new leader, Ayatollah Khomeini, stormed the American embassy in Tehran and seized its occupants. In April 1980, U.S. President Jimmy Carter authorized Operation Eagle Claw to free the 52 Americans still held hostage. The operation was massively complicated, with various units required to link up at key points. As part of the insertion stage, a number of C-130 transport planes rendezvoused with 9 RH-53 helicopters at a desert airstrip within Iran itself, near Tabas. But a fierce sandstorm blew in. 2 helicopters broke down. A third was damaged on landing, and the mission was aborted. As the aircraft took off, one helicopter clipped a C-130 and crashed. 8 Americans were killed. The mission was a disaster, with devastating political consequences for the Carter White House. November 1970, General Blackburn and Bull Simons are finalizing plans for their raid at Son Tay. Peace talks in Paris have postponed their first target date. Now Simons and his teams are placed on standby. Then the situation takes a turn for the worse. New aerial photographs show no activity in the camp. Simons must confront the possibility that the POWs have been moved. General Blackburn faces a dilemma. Any more low-level reconnaissance flights might alert the North Vietnamese, but bad weather means that high-level flights produce no results. Are the American POWs there or not? Bull Simons flies his team to Tak Ly Air Base in Thailand. Security remains airtight. The men do not even know what country they're in. Even now, they still do not know their mission. It's decision time. Go ahead or not. Washington, November 19th, 1970. Fresh reconnaissance images and intelligence now suggest the camp might be active again. Perhaps the POWs had been kept in their cells. The day before the planned date of the raid, an unmanned Buffalo Hunter reconnaissance drone overflies the site. It's dangerous. It might give the game away. But Simons needs to know. Over the target, the plane banks too early. It takes images of the horizon and not the compound itself. The intelligence on Son Tay is still unclear. And because of the delays, Operation Kingpin is already running into another problem. The monsoon season is closing in fast. Conditions are against the rescue attempt. Then, A smallest window in the bad weather means the raid might still be on. Postpone again, and a rescue attempt cannot be launched until the following year. The intelligence is still uncertain, but then a sliver of news might tip the balance in favor of the raid. Information from anti-war peace activists with contacts in Hanoi had suggested that 6 captured Americans had died, while the North claimed they were still alive. Now that figure is raised to 17. The pressure on Nixon to get out as many POWs as possible is mounting as he receives a final briefing. 27 years earlier, in World War II, German General Kurt Student has reached the point where he can launch Operation Oak, his plan to snatch Mussolini. The Hotel Campo Imperatore, where Mussolini is held, is on a plateau 7,000 feet up the Gran Sasso d'Italia. The only approach is by cable car. Student decides to use men from his elite demonstration battalion, backed up by troops from Otto Skorzeni's Special Forces. The 2 key objectives are the hotel at the top of the mountain and the cable car station down in the valley. The bulk of the parachute battalion will capture the station to prevent the Carabinieri in the valley from interfering with the operation. A company of 108 men, together with 28 of Skorzeni's commandos, will fly in by DFS glider, take the hotel, and liberate Mussolini. He will then be brought down by cable car and flown to Rome. Odds against success seem overwhelming. The Luftwaffe predicts an 80% casualty rate. Now for German General Kurt Student in 1943 and General Donald Blackburn and Bull Simons in 1970, the planning is over. Now it is time to face the next requirement in the raid's battle plan. Insertion. A key element is maintaining surprise until the moment when your forces actually hit their objective.
Insertion is the point at which the raiders reveal what they are going to do. And as a result of that, it is important to keep it as secret as possible for as long as possible.
Italy, September 11th, 1943. Student orders his teams to go without waiting for authorization from Hitler. 0600, Pratica di Mare airfield. Skorzeni's assault team planned to land at the hotel at 0700 hours to reduce the risk to the gliders from winds and thermals. But a US bombing raid delays their takeoff. Skorzeny holds back the land assault on the cable station. Otherwise, he will lose the first vital element in the attack: surprise. 1300 hours. Tugs pull the gliders skyward. 2 crash on takeoff. 2 more are lost in clouds. Just 8 continue on. 300 paratroopers are already on the way to the cable station. 1400 hours. The glider pilots see the target in front of them. Below them, the ground force closes on the cable station. The tugs release their gliders. Only then do they see that the landing zone is on a steep slope and strewn with rocks. They land anyway. The nearest glider is just 20 yards from the hotel. Paratroop sees the cable station. The escape route is secure. Operation Oak is on course. November 1970. Bull Simon still doesn't know if Operation Kingpin will ever get off the ground. He doesn't know if the North Vietnamese have been alerted to his raid. And he can't even be sure the American POWs are still at Son Tay. Thailand, 1970. Bull Simons and his raiders wait at a holding base. The monsoon season has closed in. Then a window opens up, and Simons asks permission to move the mission up a day. Having had his final briefing, President Nixon has no hesitation. A top-secret order is flashed to Simons. Green. Go. It is only now, as they make their final preparations, that Bull Simons tells his men their mission, and that if the raid goes wrong, there will be no coming back. In the Tonkin Gulf, pilots from Task Force 77 are briefed on their decoy mission. They are told nothing about the operation they are supporting, only that when they know, they will approve. At Udorn Air Base in Thailand, Simons' men climb into the Jolly Green Giants. Dick Meadows is carrying one extra piece of gear, a bullhorn. 23:18 local time. The last HH-3 takes off. The crew on the U.S. carrier begins final arming. The assault choppers begin in-flight refueling. The first A-7 catapults off the carrier USS Ranger. The choppers complete refueling and begin their approach into North Vietnam. Task Force 77's diversion goes in. 02:18. The first helicopter descends from the night sky over the POW camp at Son Tay. Now at Gran Sasso in 1943 and Son Tay in 1970, the assault teams are behind enemy lines. There is no turning back. It's time to face the next stage of the raid's battle plan: execution.
You're deep behind enemy lines. If it goes wrong, you're in deep trouble. You'd better have a plan for that and have rehearsed it.
Operation Oak, Italy, 1943. German assault troops pour from their gliders. They are confronted by 150 Carabinieri. Student has persuaded Carabinieri General Fernando Soletti to accompany the assault. Now, Otto Skorzeny sends Soletti forward. His presence takes the defenders by surprise.
The presence of General Soletti with the German raiding force was critical. His command of Italian ensured that, in fact, the operation was entirely bloodless.
The Carabinieri give in without a fight. A para-unit sees Mussolini in a hotel window and heads for him. Skorzeny and a handful of his men also race into the hotel. Mussolini's guards surrender, and he is escorted out of the building. In less than 12 minutes, the assault team has seized its target. But Skorzeny doesn't know he has a problem that could mean total failure. Operation Kingpin, North Vietnam, 1970. The teams are precisely on time. The first chopper, Apple III, hovers over the Son Tay camp. The two door gunners open up with their miniguns and destroy the guard towers. Meadows' Jolly Green Giant crashes down into the compound. His team pours out. Then Meadows presses the trigger of his bullhorn and announces calmly, "We're Americans. Keep your heads down. This is a rescue." 400 yards away, Simons' pilot mistakes the secondary school compound for the prison camp and lands there. The mistake is immensely fortuitous. The school is swarming with heavily armed and highly experienced foreign advisors, closer to the POW camp than intelligence suggested. Simons' team removes the threat. Up to 200 foreign troops are killed. Outside the main compound, another unit takes over Simons' role, blasts through the walls, and joins Meadows' team inside. Then Simons and his team chopper in to join the firefight in the compound. At Son-Tay in 1970 and Gran Sasso in 1943, the rescue bids are at their climax. It's time for the final requirement in the raid's battle plan: exit strategy. At Gran Sasso in World War II, the raiders have hit a problem. The Fieseler Storch, due to fly Mussolini out from the cable station in the valley, is damaged on landing. Student's personal pilot, Hans Gerlach, flies a backup Storch into the tiny field by the hotel. The landing is difficult, but the takeoff will be suicidal. Mussolini receives the bad news. There is only a short downhill stretch before a sheer 6,500-foot drop. He is clearly concerned when it's explained that Gerlach will have to run the plane over the cliff and hope to pick up enough airspeed as it drops. The Storch is designed for 2 people. Gerlach and the overweight Mussolini squeeze in. Then, the massive 6'3" Otto Skorzeny insists on accompanying Mussolini and climbs in as well. The plane is dangerously overloaded.
The raid was actually filmed, and you have this one point where Skorzeny, Mussolini, and their pilot are rolling down the mountain in their little Fieseler, and you're wondering, is it going to fly? Are they going to make it?
Gerlach guns the engine as the paratroops hold their breath. Then he catapults down the slope. The Storch drops over the cliff and out of sight. But Gerlach keeps control and finally pulls the Storch up, away, and into the sky. At Pratica di Mare, Mussolini is transferred to a Heinkel HE-111, which takes him on to Vienna. The next day, he flies on to Rostenburg in East Prussia. Waiting for him is Adolf Hitler. Son-Tay, 1970. Meadows' team frantically searches the cells, one by one, shouting for American POWs. But the prison is deserted. The cells are empty. The American POWs who signaled for rescue are gone. Simons orders extraction. Meadows rigs his Jolly Green Giant with explosives. Everything must be destroyed. Then they pull out, empty-handed. Ironically, it later emerges that the American POWs were probably moved from Son-Tay because nearby rivers were rising and there was a danger of the camp being flooded, possibly caused by a CIA rainmaking operation. So how well did Operations Oak and Kingpin meet the requirements in the battle plan for raids? Clarity of purpose. In Operation Oak, German General Kurt Student had a clear objective: find and release Mussolini. In Operation Kingpin, American General Donald Blackburn's objective was also simple: spring the U.S. POWs from Son-Tay. Appropriate means. Student had the right men for the assault and the gliders to take them in. Kingpin commander Bull Simons also had the correct men and the necessary means to get them to their target. Intelligence. Student originally had no intelligence on Mussolini's whereabouts, but acquired it. Simons had the first vital intelligence, but when he needed to confirm the POWs were still there, his information failed him. Insertion. In both cases, the missions achieved total surprise. Both the gliders and the helicopters succeeded brilliantly. Execution. Student's task force freed Mussolini within 12 minutes of landing. Simons's assault plan within the Sante compound also worked brilliantly, even though there were no POWs. Exit strategy. Flying Mussolini directly from the Gran Sasso was well improvised, but then jeopardized by Scorzeni's insistence on accompanying him. But it was successful. Simons's men exited Sante quickly and efficiently, and within the time limit set for the mission, but without the POWs. And what of the overall impact of the two missions? Scorzeni and his men pulled off a propaganda coup, but Mussolini's rescue ultimately achieved little. It was a tactical triumph, but a strategic failure.
The raid to release Mussolini was a great success, but by the 12th of September, Mussolini was yesterday's man. He was a disgraced dictator who was wanted by nobody but Hitler.
Paradoxically, although Simons's team found Sante empty and thus failed in its tactical objective, it did have a certain strategic value.
It showed the American people and the prisoners that the US government had not forgotten them.
The North Vietnamese claimed that the raiders had been driven off with heavy casualties, but in reality, they were shocked and disturbed at the raid's audacity. It also led to a major improvement in the way US POWs were treated.
The Sante raid convinced the North Vietnamese that it was better to use American POWs as healthy bargaining chips rather than tools of crude propaganda or as intelligence assets.
At Sante, however, there remains an interesting question, which even 35 years later, most analysts prefer not to address. Bull Simons initially lands outside the wrong compound, 400 yards from the POW camp itself. A compound where up to 200 heavily armed and highly experienced Russian and Chinese military advisors are garrisoned. Conventional wisdom attributes this to pilot error, but perhaps there is another explanation.
Great commanders are both great planners and lucky, and that's the key question with Bull Simon. Was he a great planner, and that he knew about the Russians and the Chinese, or was he just phenomenally lucky that the helicopter he happened to be in with the largest force landed at exactly the right time and right place to destroy the primary threat to his raid?
Either way, Bull Simon sent a very powerful and personal signal from US Special Operations to Moscow and Beijing. So what is the future of raiding as a battle plan?
Raids can have a great strategic impact. They're flexible, they can be quickly mounted, and they can insert troops into areas that are otherwise inaccessible. And in the 21st century, they are all the things that are required on a battlefield. And as a result of that, they have a very secure future.
Given the uncertain and dangerous nature of the 21st century world, it's likely we'll see many more dramatic actions by elite special operations units, highly trained in the ruthless tactics of raiding.